On today's show, the NBA arguably has more young talent than ever before. So Gavin and we're going to draft our favorite players 25 and under right now in the NBA on today's edition of Locked On NBA Game Night.
When that final buzzer rings, you know it's time for Locked On NBA Game Night. All the post-game reactions to every game across the league, every single night, with insights only the hosts at Locked On can provide. It's the true NBA fans' one stop for all the action. Every game, every night. It's Locked On NBA Game Night. Tipping off now.
What's up, everybody? My name is Cade Cunningham, and you might know me from Locked On Cavs, joined today by Gavin Schall of Locked On Knicks. He's filling in for Swipe, and we are here to talk about some of the best young, talented guys in the NBA because the league is just absolutely overflowing with talent. But before we get started, thank you for making Locked On NBA Game Night, the show where we talk about every game every night, and when there's not games, we find something to talk about. Thank you for making this your first listen today, and thank you for making the show your first listen every day. You can find us anywhere you get your podcasts, Apple, Spotify, or anywhere else. Make sure to drop us a 5-star rating, leave us a nice review, and of course, be a friend, tell a friend about the show. And if you're watching on YouTube, hit that thumbs up button for us, subscribe to the channel, and click that notification bell so you don't miss the latest content from us. And of course, today's show is brought to you by FanDuel. Football season right around the corner, so visit the FanDuel app today and start planning your futures bets. Oh, love a good futures bet, but start planning your futures bets right now. Gavin, the league right now, so filled with young, up-and-coming talent or even established talent because of how young guys come into the league. I'm very excited for this 25 and under draft today.
Yeah, I thought it was a really, it's an interesting exercise. And when I went through it, I kind of came to the same conclusion you did. Like, the guys I'm leaving off are all players I could see making an all-star team next season, which is crazy when you're talking the youngest players in the league.
Right, like I'm going through the list and I'm like, I wonder if Gavin's going to take that guy. And I'm like, actually, that's like the 15th best guy under 25. Like, there's just so many good players. But with you filling in, I'm going to give you the first pick. And
wow.
When I was thinking about this, I'm like, well, there's a very clear direction to go. And then I double checked through. I'm like, actually, there's not a clear direction to go. Like, I actually think this could go one of two ways. So I'm going to give you the first pick here and see where you go.
Okay, I am fascinated by that because I think I disagree with it. I think there is a very clear direction to go, and my 2-3 is actually where I was having a real debate. I have a feeling based on what you said, it's not as ambiguous for you. To me, the obvious number one pick is Victor Wembanyama. The only question is the long-term health, and that is a very reasonable question, right? You want to say, I'll go ahead and spoil who my 2-3 are. Like, you want to go ahead and say Cade Cunningham and Anthony Edwards are just much surer health bets than Wemby, who obviously dealt with blood clots. And like, it is a tangled history, right, of guys that are taller than 7'2", having real longevity in the NBA. And it's a risk that he has a very short, tragic career. I just think that the talent is too much not to bet on it. Led the NBA in blocks per game each of his first two seasons, a high steal percentage, a low foul rate, an elite defensive rebounder. Like, I think Chet Holmgren and maybe your guy, Evan Mobley, but I'd really probably only put Chet in there as someone who can compete with him defensively over the next decade. I think we were talking about a generational defensive player who hasn't really scrapped the surface yet of what he's going to be offensively, and yet still put up a fairly efficient 24 points per game last year. The one thing I'm really fascinated about with him is just 27% of his shots last season came at the rim for a guy who's listed at 7'4". In actuality, in shoes is probably closer to 7'6". That has to change in a big way. I wonder if De'Aaron Fox, playing with the fastest point guard in basketball, if that could change the equation. He could get a little more lobs at the rim, because when he does get touches down there and he gets into his bag and he gets into his footwork, like, his length just makes him utterly unstoppable. Became a high volume, high accuracy for a big 3-point shooter last year. A genuinely unique talent in NBA history. Plus 10 on-off net rating for cleaning the glass. 7th in the entire league in Darko, which is probably the best all-in-one analytic. First amongst players under 25. Danny, he trained with Monks this offseason. He trained with Kevin Garnett this offseason. How can you bet against that?
I think if you do want to, and listen, I that's not the wrong pick. Like, I do think that Wemby is the right pick there. I don't have a real pushback from anything that we've seen, but I do think that the injury thing, and I do understand that he has taken a lot of preventative measures to try and ensure that he stays healthy, because he is, I think, very aware of guys his size or close to his size that have had some significant health issues throughout their careers, right? Like that is not some new thing. And obviously had a very serious health scare of his own this last year, which is why in all likelihood, he was not named the defensive player of the year because he missed obviously too many games to be eligible, but he was on that path. And I believe ESPN, I know Brian Windhurst has done a lot of really good reporting about what preventative measures he's really been taking to take care of his body since the time he was like 12 years old. Like this is what his life has been building to. But at a certain point when your body is what his is, I think that is the only pushback that, you know what, he is a bit of an injury risk because guys at that size typically do have some injury risks at some point in their career. But I think with what he has shown on the floor already, and of course he is not even, saying he hasn't scratched the surface, I think is even understating things. Like he has so far to go and has such a high ceiling where it's like, if he is a top 5 player in the world at his peak, it feels like he has failed. And that sounds so incredibly unfair to say, but it's like this guy better be the best player in the world or he has not reached his ceiling or not even come close to it, because of all the natural gifts that he has with the size and just like we've not seen that quite that combination really.
Yeah, I can't argue with that. I mean, I remember talking to shout out to my guy PD Webb on Twitter, my favorite draft analyst, and he had him as not the best prospect since LeBron, the best prospect since Kareem, right? That is he is the epitome of a freak of nature, the epitome of Kevin Durant's unicorn label that he gave to Kristaps Porzingis, right? Like he is arguably the most uniquely talented player, like maybe Will Chamberlain's the one other guy in that equation we've ever seen in NBA history. In a world where LeBron exists as a top 20 player in the league at age 40, that's saying something.
I would love to, just as an aside, I would love to see what all the draft analysts would say about Kareem, like right now. If he were draft eligible, like what would our guys at No Ceilings, what would the scouting report on Kareem have looked like back at that point? Just because we're so much more into the NBA draft as a basketball society than we were when he was picked way back in the day. For the number 2 overall selection, I'm going to go with the guy you named, Anthony Edwards. What he has shown offensively, and really on both ends of the floor, I do think that his defensive motor could be a little bit better than what it has been, certainly in the regular season. I understand it, but he has so far in his career, I think, been one of the best offensive players in basketball. He has turned into, which I do think was a big question about him coming out of Georgia. What would that 3-point shot look like? But he has turned into one of the most effective, prolific 3-point shooters in the NBA, which I think is a really, really big step that I certainly was not anticipating. And I don't know that a lot of league was anticipating. Like I thought he'd be able to do a lot of really good things offensively. I just didn't think that he would become like the best high volume 3-point shooter in a full season the way that he was last year. So for him to accomplish that, like tells me that he is going to be somebody that's going to reach his ceiling. And the fact that he has led some pretty good teams at a young age, because as we both know, winning in the NBA is a very, very difficult thing to do. Winning in Minnesota is next to impossible with what that franchise has been throughout the course of its history. So to take that organization, which I believe had won 2 playoff series in its entire history before Anthony Edwards was drafted, to back-to-back Western Conference Finals, and I'm not trying to crown him as if he's an NBA champion, but I do think that is an accomplishment that deserves some praise. The winning aspect of this matters to me, and I think that Anthony Edwards has shown that he can do that at a high level. Whether or not he gets to the true mountaintop in the near future, I don't know, but he's a guy that I would want to bet on.
I love Anthony Edwards, one of just my favorite guys to watch. Probably my favorite. I think he's the funniest player in the NBA by a substantial margin. He is an incredible actor. So those are all marks on his ledger. This might be stupid. Like I think he is this probably. I mean, put Tyrese Haliburton in those conversations as well. I think he has either the best or second best resume of anyone on this list, which is crazy for a guy who just turned 24. I had Cade Cunningham one spot ahead of him. And I think it's a fantastic debate between those two. Like statistically, you have to pick Anthony Edwards. Accomplishment wise, you have to pick Anthony Edwards. I just look at the context that those two guys play in. And Ant has been blessed with that controversial Rudy Gobert trade, right? With the defensive backbone, like arguably the best in the NBA. And like just an incredible amount of shooting around him. Maybe not his first 2 years, but certainly in those 2 Western Conference Finals runs, like give credit to Tim Connolly. Like they have built around him about as well as any young star has been built around, maybe outside of the Oklahoma City guys. Cade, conversely, until this season, has had just terrible context, right? Zero shooting around him. Obviously, this year that improved with Malik Beasley, the second in made threes in the NBA compared to Anthony Edwards. And one more aside, to your point, Ant being arguably a top 3 athlete and a top 3 shooter in the world is insane. Like maybe some could quibble with that top 3 shooter mark, but he led the league in 3. So that's ridiculous. I think the difference between the two is that I still trust Cade's decision making a lot more, and maybe that shouldn't overcome the athleticism and just sheer scoring talent gap between the two, because I mean, Ant is obviously different level as a shooter, much better finisher, and Cade has consistently been a poor finisher at the rim in the NBA. Again, I think some of that is he has just been driving headfirst into clogged lanes his entire career. Cade has essentially only played 3 seasons, right? Just 12 games his second season versus 5 for Ant. Cade is a talented scorer. I saw a stat today from the All City NBA podcast. Shout out to them, our old friend Adam Morris over there. Cade was 9th in the NBA in ISO scoring efficiency when no double came, which I think gives you a better idea of his true scoring talent, because he sees doubles, given the context around him in Detroit, about as frequently as any young star in the NBA. The analytics certainly favor Ant. He was 2nd amongst guys under 25 in LeBron, 2nd in Darko, and 8th in the entire NBA in Darko. And I think Ant really showed me something in Game 4 of the Western Conference Finals, where Oklahoma City basically dared him to be a playmaker, and they said, "We don't think you're good enough at this." And over and over and over again, he made the right decision. Minnesota shooters were lighting it up. He kept feeding them. He didn't force the issue. He didn't have to be the star. For a guy who's been called immature, and certainly you could say that about his off the court stuff, I thought that was a real moment of growth for him. I think I just am a little bit more comfortable with the ball in Cade's hands. So controversial decision. I have no pushback for people who want to pick Ant. I would have taken Cade one spot ahead, and obviously that's my next pick.
So I do think, before we shift the conversation to Cade, I think the one thing that I would say about Ant is he has proven multiple times he can be the guy on a really good team. And Cade, the Detroit Pistons had a great year this year. They went from 14 wins last year to 44 wins with the season that just concluded in June. And that was a great bounce back season for them. And Cade was awesome. He deserved to be an all-star. He deserved to be an all-NBA player. He had a great season. But I think I just need to see him be the guy on a pretty good team more than once, where we've seen Ant go on deep playoff runs. And I just think if the potential is near the same, if there are so many comparable things, because I don't disagree with that. I love Cade Cunningham as a player. I think he's terrific, and not just because we have the same last name. But if those things are close, I am going to lean towards the guy that has won at a higher level, which Anthony Edwards has. There's no comparison to this point in their careers. Now, we will continue the conversation talking about Cade Cunningham next, right here on Locked On NBA Game Night. Today's show brought to you by FanDuel. Well, August 26th, officially FanDuel Futures Day. That's right. A big day, a brand new holiday for football fans who live for bold predictions and preseason hunches. That's right. For just 24 hours, FanDuel giving you deals on NFL season predictions. So whether you're calling your MVP, eyeing a long shot division winner, or ready to crown your Super Bowl champ before week 1 even kicks off, this is your moment. That's right. August 26th is the day. Maybe you have a hunch who's going to win the Super Bowl. Baltimore Ravens, Buffalo Bills, Philadelphia Eagles, all favorites right now at plus 700 to win the Super Bowl on FanDuel. Or maybe you're like me, you think Kansas City, the team with the guy in Patrick Mahomes at plus 800. Maybe not the best value, but they're not the favorites. Kansas City's not the favorites. I think I'm going to take Kansas City more times than not. Maybe you think I'm right, maybe you think I'm wrong, but you can put your money where your mouth is when FanDuel Futures Day arrives on August 26th. So visit the FanDuel app today, or FanDuel.com. That is FanDuel.com. Start planning your futures bets right now, because FanDuel Futures Day, one day only, August 26th. FanDuel, play your game. Thank you again for making Locked On NBA Game Night your first listen today and every day. Like I said earlier, you can find the show anywhere you get your podcasts, Apple, Spotify, or anywhere else. Gavin, you are taking Cade Cunningham number 3, as you said, and he is somebody that, as a prospect, I really liked coming out of Oklahoma State. I just thought this guy is like, and this was, Ben Simmons at the time, Cade Cunningham was drafted was thought of, I think, a little bit differently than Ben Simmons is right now. It was like if Ben Simmons just had a reliable jump shot, it would kind of be Cade Cunningham. And at that point, Ben Simmons had made an all-NBA team. So I'm like, there's no way that this guy is not good. And I do wonder, to your point, how we would be looking at Cade differently had Detroit just not been a dumpster fire for the first couple of years of his career.
Yeah, that's everything to me. Like as I said it before, but it's worth reiterating. As poor of a context for a star of that caliber in the first 3 years of their career that I could remember. And I was really down on Cade. A lot of people were really down on Cade, but you could always see like the IQ there. And I go back to obviously I'm biased because I mostly watch him against the Knicks, but a January 13th game against the Knicks where everyone was playing pretty well for New York, right? And he was just killing Mikal Bridges. And New York does what they often do in this situation. They said, all right, OG Anunoby, go shut off the water. And I think OG is for a wing defender about as good as anyone in the NBA at being like, all right, great, you're hot, you're a star. Doesn't matter. And especially someone like Cade Cunningham, right? Who isn't a freak of nature athletically, like as much as Cade like relies on his strength and his skill, like OG, like bigger, stronger, faster in all likelihood. And Cade just cooked him, right? Then they tried Mikal again. He cooks Mikal, right? He's getting to the rim. He's splitting double teams. He's spraying one-handed lasers to the corner for open threes. Like the guy is a basketball genius. And I see like, he's not quite as he's not as skilled as a scorer, right? Because other guys in a different category, but there is some Luka Doncic in there. And I think who he is as like a leader and like just someone who he just seems like an elite teammate. I think there are just so many qualities there that scream championship winning star. And even though he hasn't done it yet, I don't know. Maybe I'm wrong. I just see a lot of what it takes to be the best player on a title team in Cade Cunningham.
You know, I think he does have a lot of what it takes. Now, being the best player in a title team, of course, matters so much more that it's not just about the best player. Like there's so much more that goes into it than just that best player. And I don't know that, I mean, Detroit is headed in the right direction, but for the first few years, it was so far away from the right direction. So we will see what that future looks like. But he is somebody that as a prospect, I really like coming out of Oklahoma State. I was not somebody that lost faith. And that draft, looking back on it, like there was a lot of talent to come out of that draft. And I do think that even with how good Evan Mobley has been so far, because those two were selected in the same year. And obviously Scotty Barnes won Rookie of the Year that year. Jalen Green, Franz Wagner. Like I think if that draft was redrafted, Cade probably still goes number one. Like I don't think that and maybe there's some discussion there between him and Evan Mobley, but I think Cade would probably still be the first pick.
Yeah, it's pretty clear cut for me. But Danny, who's your next pick?
So this I think would be a lot easier had Tyrese Haliburton not torn his Achilles.
Yep.
Because I think he's the clear answer, but the Achilles injury really scares me, right? Like, and I don't know that he's going to be somebody that is super affected by it because he does not like his game is not because of him being an explosive athlete, right? Like if Ja Morant, for instance, had that injury, and I'm not saying that I'm wishing this on Ja because obviously I'm not, but just as an example here.
Sure.
If Ja Morant would have had this injury, like I think his career would just be so dramatically altered that he would never look the same because he's built on being an explosive athlete. I don't know what Tyrese Haliburton is going to be, and it scares me enough that maybe he has played his best basketball because of this. I don't know, but I don't know that he hasn't. So because of that, I'm not going to select him, and I imagine you'll probably select him next. But I'm going to go with Evan Mobley here because I look at him as somebody that I went into last year thinking, you know what, Evan's probably going to make an all-star team or two. He's probably going to make a third team all-NBA or two just because he's so good defensively and he's good enough offensively. But I was somebody that had maybe lost a little bit of faith in what his offensive development was going to turn into because it just hadn't clicked yet through 3 years. And then the steps forward that he took last year made second team all-NBA in his fourth year. Obviously won defensive player of the year, has been a defensive player of the year finalist 2 times in the first 4 years of his career, which is a really difficult thing to do as a young player. I look at him now and say, this guy might not ever win an MVP, but if Evan Mobley is your best player or your second best player, the way that he is for the Cavs right now, you're going to be a really, really good team. And I look at him as somebody that I went from thinking, you know, maybe a second team all NBA at some point, probably a couple third teams, handful of all-star teams to now I think he is somebody that can block off his calendar for All-Star weekend. He's going to be there every year. And I think he's going to make multiple first-team All-NBAs. So to have that type of talent still on the board, like, I'm going to go there because I think he's a safer bet than anybody else.
Yeah, I don't mind the pick at all. He was ninth on my board, so obviously a lot lower than you had him, and yet whoever you picked, I was going to say this, my 4 through 9 is incredibly interchangeable. Another guy who the analytics models love, 4th in Darko amongst 25 and unders last season. You said it all, deep boy, all NBA second team. I think the only question there for me is I want to see him at center for big minutes, because if this were an expansion draft and you could only pick amongst guys 25 and under, and I was starting my roster with those young guys, I'd want to know that Evan Mobley could be like, I don't even want to say an elite defensive center because I don't really have any questions about that. But like, if he's the second best player on your title team, which I think we'd agree is probably the ceiling there, like, he has to do it as a center, I think, not as a power forward. And maybe Cleveland proves that to be baloney this year. But according to Crafted NBA, I think 35th best rim protector in the NBA. So very, very good, not elite, at least according to their metric. Danny, you watch him every game. Maybe you disagree with that. And I think he's maybe a tier below someone like Bam Adebayo as a switch defender, but still for a big top 5 in the NBA. Like, he's special, and he was stronger and meaner last season. That was my big question about him, and he checked every box. So I think that is a totally reasonable pick. I had Tyrese Haliburton at 4th on my board, and to me, it is a belief that he will recover. Right, got the surgery a day after, which is big. Was able to get to New York, find a top surgeon. I know Indiana is very optimistic that when he comes back, he will be roughly the same guy, just with some rust on him. Just brings a level of joy to the table and to the game. And maybe that's dumb for that to be the first thing I say about him, but I think that's part of the reason why Indiana just had a string of the best comebacks you will ever see in the NBA playoffs, right? I think they had like 3 of the 4 comebacks from 10 plus down in the final minute. Danny, your podcast was a victim of that. My podcast was a victim of that.
Oh yeah.
The shot and the choke moment against the Knicks. And then he actually, like, didn't win the game. And then he says, screw it, I'll just beat him in overtime. And he does it. And like the way he was coming on that game 7, right? He had 3 threes before tearing his Achilles, playing on a busted calf. He was going to go into Oklahoma City and beat one of the greatest regular season teams in league history. At least it felt that way at the start of that game. Like, just a completely fearless player, and like the rare auto Hall of Fame talent that can imbue his style on a team, much like Steve Nash, who I think is his spiritual predecessor, and have a championship level squad, right? Perfect meeting of player, coach, and roster between him, Rick Carlisle, and the team that Kevin Pritchard has built in Indiana. I love the guy. I'm really excited for him to come back healthy.
I am too. I hope that he's able to look as good as he was before the injury, and I hope that he can get better, right? Because when we're talking about guys that are under 25, we are speaking about guys that are not in their primes yet, that we are assuming.
We should say real quick, 25 and under, because he is 25 years old. But.
Yes, 25 and under, yes. But we are assuming guys that are not in their primes, like guys that are still on an upwards trajectory. If you think like 28, 29 is the prime of an NBA player's career. And I don't know that that's going to happen anymore. And I hope it does. I don't know that it will. And that's ultimately the thing that scared me. But what he's been able to do, and it's not just this postseason, it was getting to the conference finals last postseason when the majority of people picked that Pacers team to lose to the Milwaukee Bucks in the first round. And of course, yeah, the Bucks had some injuries and Giannis didn't play in that series. But nobody expected Indiana to win that series. And then nobody expected them to beat the New York Knicks in the second round, just the same way that nobody expected. I mean, I think more people expected them to beat the Bucks this year and picked them to do so. Nobody expected them to beat the Cavs. And then maybe some people expected them to pick the Knicks, but no one thought that when the Eastern Conference playoff bracket came out, no one said, oh, the Indiana Pacers, what a path to the finals they're going to go through. Like, that was just not even a thought. So the fact that he's shown in similar light to Anthony Edwards, just, I guess, to a little bit more success, shown that he can be a successful postseason player is very important. Again, just the injury is really the only thing that scared me. Well, we have a couple more draft picks to get to, so we're going to do that next right here on Locked On NBA Game Night. So, Gavin, I'm up with my third pick. And I believe that this might be a little bit controversial, and I'm really interested to see what you say about it.
Can I
I'm gonna
guess
go
who
with,
you're going to pick?
you can guess who I'm going to pick.
Are you going to pick Cooper Flag?
I'm not going to pick Cooper Flag.
Oh, okay.
I have
Who
a
are you
rule.
picking? Yeah.
I have a rule because he's never played in an NBA game. And like a year from now, I expect him to be part of this podcast, but I've not seen him play. Like he could stink. I have
Mhm.
no idea.
Yeah.
I'm going to go Jalen Williams.
Okay, that would have been my pick to be
okay.
Clear, after Cooper Flag, but go ahead and explain it.
Oh, so you're going Cooper Flag next. I love that.
Well, yeah. All right, tell me about Jalen Williams. Yeah.
So he's obviously already made an All-NBA team. He has proven that he can be the second best player on a championship winning team, and not just a championship winning team, but what was from start to finish in Oklahoma City, a historically great team. And I think that after last season's postseason, where they lose to the Dallas Mavericks in 6 games, and as a favorite in that Mavericks team, just kind of similar to Indiana this year, no one expected them to get to the finals the way they did. But this year, I think, was a big year for him. And it's very rare for a big year in a player's career to come in their 3rd season the way it did for Jalen Williams. So for him to be able to go out there and prove that he can be so good on both ends of the floor, be a true two-way star player on both ends in your 3rd year on a championship winning team. Yeah, SGA is going to be the guy that gets a lot of the love. Chet Holmgren, obviously a very good player in his own right that I think deserves at the very least consideration, although there are a lot of health questions with him too. But I just look at him and say, maybe he doesn't have the same ceiling as the guys that we've talked about so far, but I think he has a super high floor. And for however long he's on the Thunder, for however long he's in the situation, I look at him and say, that guy is just going to be so steady. He's going to be so good. We already know that he's going to show up in these big moments because he's done it before, despite being so young and so early in his career. I just look at him and say, there's so much there with him. And I think that he is going to keep getting better too.
I don't think it's a crazy pick at all. I think there's an argument for him to go earlier, right? Let's zoom in on that game 5, right? 2-2 series. Statistics tell you that that game probably was the series. Maybe it ultimately was, given how game 6 and game 7 went. And he puts up 40 points, 6 rebounds, 4 assists, 14 to 25 from the field, 3 for 5 for 3, 9 for 12 from the line. Best finals game by any under 25 guy since Dwayne Wade in 06. Maybe Kevin Durant had one on that previous Thunder team. Maybe Russell Westbrook did. I don't quite remember. But the fact that he was in those conversations and we're talking about him, and I kind of agree with you where I think his ceiling might not be as high as anyone drafted ahead of him or even the guy that I'm going to pick. And yet, like, he is the prototypical two-way wing, takes literally nothing off the table, just became a vicious, aggressive, ballsy driver of the basketball last season, high-level shooter, 3rd in LeBron amongst guys 25 and under, already an All-NBA team to his name. Like, the dude is a winner, incredibly smart, vicious, physical defender. He's a killer. I take no issue with that pick. I had Cooper Flag as my next guy. I think you could justify having him as high as 2. I think, like you said, he hasn't played a second of NBA basketball. You could completely justify not having him in the top 30 of this list if you want to. And yet, I think at 18, doesn't turn 19 until about halfway through the season, there is just such a long runway for someone, at least to me, and you're right, he could suck. I think he's going to end up being, when it's all said and done, pending health, like one of the 20 or 30 best defensive players in the history of the NBA. And that is a lot to put on someone who hasn't played.
That is high expectations before you played a game.
Very similar to Victor Wembanyama. Maybe on its face a stupid statement, but people a lot smarter than me. That's how he profiles that in the floor. Incredibly smart, incredibly switchable, freak of nature athletically. Just checks every box you could want on the defensive end of the floor. His shot, probably the biggest question mark there. Answered in a big way, hitting 38.5% of his threes at Duke. I know Tim Legler, who's questioned his shot mechanics. At times they've looked very smooth to me off the dribble. At times they look a little shaky. I have no question that the guy is going to work. I think the intangibles are special in a way like almost everyone else that we've drafted are, like Wemby, Cade, Tyrese. I think he's in a category with those guys. To me, like, people have compared him to Jason Tatum on offensively. I don't think he's ever going to be that good. I don't think he's that fluid. He has high hips. I don't really see him being that type of 1A scorer on a title team ever. But I saw on Reddit, weird source to cite, someone compare him to Pascal Siakam on offense. If he can be that and like a better, bigger Andre Kirilenko defensively, That's a Hall of Famer in my mind. At 18, like maybe a 17, 18-year career. Again, these are hypotheticals. All these other guys have accomplished stuff. It is actively offensive to draft him this high, but I'm a believer, so I'm gonna call my shot and take him.
So I don't hate that. It's hard for me to do it because I've not seen him play. And I mean, everything that you said, as far as the hypotheticals go, they could come true. He might be that. He might be the future Hall of Famer, but he also might be out of the league in 7 years and just not pan out. And that, I think if you're drafting, which obviously we're doing here, it's a good pick because you're betting on that upside. You're betting on that potential. And he is, I do think, obviously viewed as a great prospect, but I also look at the situation he's going into in Dallas, where he's going to get to play alongside Anthony Davis. And I think as a young defender and adjusting to playing defense in the NBA is really, really difficult because the guys are so skilled offensively. But I think having that caliber of defensive player in a big man behind you is going to make life easier for him. And then if and when Kyrie Irving gets back and looks like Kyrie Irving from his knee injury, that could be something too that makes his life easier offensively. So I don't hate that pick. I love the upside bet. It's just I look at some of the guys that have accomplished things. I just go, there's a world in which, we're talking about it. I'm not comparing him to Anthony Edwards here because he's not done anything, but I'm going to compare him to Anthony Edwards here. There's a world where he doesn't accomplish as much in terms of winning as Anthony Edwards has already. Right. Yep. Like that could happen. We have no idea. And that's just part of my apprehension. So I've got the last pick. I'm going to go Paolo Banchero here. He is a do everything scorer. I think he's still a little bit rough around the edges. I would have loved to have seen what last year Gavin would have looked like for him had he not had that injury so early in the year. He played the first 5 games, and I think he was averaging like 30 points a game through the first 5 games. And obviously that is an incredibly small sample size, but he looked like a guy that made that 3rd year leap. Like you could just tell from the start of the season, oh, this guy's going to be awesome. And he misses, I think it was around 8 weeks. Obviously Franz Wagner missed a lot of time last year too with his own oblique injury, and the Magic were never really whole. And I do think that had they been whole, had he been fully healthy for the entire year, we might be looking at Paolo in a little bit different light. I look at him as a scorer, as somebody that I would trust to be able to do everything. The fact that since he got into the NBA, he's been able to get to the free throw line as frequently as he is. And I know it's not everybody's favorite skill, but drawing fouls is a skill, and Paolo can do that with the best of them in the league. That to me, I think is a really good sign. I would like to see his shot diet change. I would like to see him improve as a shooter from beyond the arc, but I think he's got all the tools to do it. And at 6'10", I think he's got a very, very rare combination of size and scoring ability from different areas on the floor. That is the upside that I would want to bet on.
Yeah, he was, I think if you want a larger sample size, I think he was at 29 points per game after the All-Star break. So he's incredible. I had 3 guys ahead of him. I'll give my honorable mentions at the risk that we might get to do a part 2 of this at some point in the future. But I had Chet Holmgren, best rim protector in the NBA, according to Crafted NBA last year. I just think he's going to be a defensive monster, developing offensive game. I think Franz Wagner is the better of the 2 Magic players. 3 of his 4 years in the NBA, 90th percentile on-off net rating differential, plus 14 last year, 98th percentile, just has to figure out that jumper, which has been terrible the last 2 years. I had Evan Mobley ahead of him. I had Tyrese Maxey ahead of him. And then I had Paolo. And then my last 5 or 6 were LaMelo Ball, Amen Thompson, Darius Garland, Jaren Jackson Jr., Alperen Şengün, and Scotty Barnes. I'm 100% sure I forgot someone while making that list. And Triple J should probably be a little bit higher at him, a tiny bit low. But that's my list. And Danny, thanks for having me on to guest co-host with you. This was a really fun exercise.
Thanks for doing this. If you want to yell about either of our lists, check us out. Locked on Knicks for Gavin, Locked on Cavs for me. Thank you for hanging out with us. And we will be back again next week right here at Locked on NBA Game Night, talking about every game, every night, and even things when there aren't games right here on Locked on NBA.